Hi, my name is Matt, and if you're like me, you may really enjoy wood turning. If you're also like me, you may be thinking it's time for some new tools. However, if you go and look on Amazon, you're going to notice that most new carbide tools are going to run you north of $100. And I ain't got that cash, which got me thinking, I wonder if I can use some of those mini lathe tools that you see at Harbor Freight for like 20 bucks after a coupon to make some carbide tools for wood turning. Let's see about that. Now the first thing that we need is our carbide tool bits. I'm just using some that I got at Harbor Freight, and if I was going to do this again, I would actually use the lead ones because I think they're more applicable. Next we're going to use some tubes of galvanized steel that will fit the carbide bits inside, and a connector that we got all those from just Home Depot. Lastly, I'm going to use a locking key. Now, you don't have to do this, you could just epoxy in the bits into the tubes. Next we're going to need some epoxy and some wood for a handle. This was a piece of firewood, which unfortunately I didn't end up using. Now we're going to take our tubes and we're going to make sure again that our carbide bits will fit inside. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is determine which tube we want to use to hold and which tube we're going to have as the handle. And we're just going to connect them with our coupler. Now, what you can do in this step is actually epoxy the tube that's going to go into the handle into the coupler, so that way you don't have to worry about the coupler coming off. If you're going to epoxy the coupler and the tube inside the handle, make sure to clean up the area that you're going to epoxy. Now before we start drilling, we need to make sure that we know where the seam in the tube is. Most of these tubes were made pretty cheaply and will have a seam running down the middle. We're going to use that and drill on the exact opposite side for our key. Now for these keys, you're going to want to start drilling, and this would have gone a lot easier if I had center punched. You can just make sure to lubricate. And I'm going to drill a small hole, and then finish it up with a bigger hole that will accept my tap. I'm sorry that the picture is so grainy. Now once you find the right tab, you can just go about slowly inserting it, and every once in a while you're going to want to counter turn to actually break the chip that you're making. You'll get to a point where it just spins freely in and out, and I'm just going to clean up the surface with the file. Now it's time to test out the actual key, and so to do this I'm just going to use a Allen wrench, and I'm going to slowly insert it and then back it out and keep working it in very slowly to make sure those threads are perfect and I don't mangle the threads of the key. Once you're done, it's time to test fit it and to make sure that your bit gets firmly held in place, which it is. You could stop there, but I'm going to turn the handle. So at first I showed this firewood. Unfortunately there was a split in the middle, so I can't use that. Instead, I'm going to use this 1-inch round dowel that's just made out of pine and is really easy to work with. Now, for myself, I'm going to cut off a section of about 10 inches, but this is really purely on preference. Now I'm going to go ahead and drill into the square side a hole that's going to accept my metal pipe. And I just want to get roughly the center. You can be far more accurate with this if you want. And just make sure to evacuate the chips. You want to go further down than you need to. Just make sure that your pipe fits in, and you could stop right here and you have everything nice and done. But I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to turn up this handle on the lathe to make it look a little bit nicer. So what I'm going to do is fiddle with getting this into a good position. And my first couple test cuts, I noticed that I was not exactly in the best position, but once I got to a spot where I was comfortable with how much it was taking off, I decided to just do this with the tool that I had just made to get a handle for it. Now you can turn your handle whatever way you want. I just went for kind of a basic spindle design that I felt would be comfortable in my hand. But this part's completely up to you. Now you can see me working on the back ends, and I want to make sure to turn that to a small section closer to the end. At this point, I'm just starting to get a rough idea of where this is going to end. And here are some ridges to help increase the ability to hold this. Then I'm just going to sand this down really well. Now it's time to spruce it up a little, and I'm going to use a dark walnut stain to do that. I'm just going to generously apply this onto the actual tool itself. Make sure that I get every part as much as I can coated in the stain. And then you can just dry it off. Now I'm going to apply a little bit of paste wax, and my method for doing this is just very messy. Get a lot of it on there and then buff it out. And do an extreme buffing with the lathe actually on. And I think this gives it a nice and distressed look. Now that it's done, I can just cut it off. Now, this is completely unnecessary, but I'm just going to go ahead and spray paint the actual front of the tool. I'm going to go for a black spray paint to match the black walnut. Try and make this look a little bit more professional. Now once that's all dry, it's time to epoxy the lathe tool into the handle. I'm using some JB weld just because it's going to have a little bit stronger adhesion than some normal 5-minute epoxy. And you just want to make sure you stuff that epoxy into the handle and put a little bit of epoxy on the threads. As long as you put it at where you're first inserting, it'll go all the way down, and it helps if you just give it a little turn. Now you probably made a bit of a ridge of epoxy. You can just take that off with a little piece of paper or really whatever you have lying around. And you're done. So there we are. Now this is the end result that I ended up getting, and personally I think I'm going to probably make a new handle eventually that's not using pine. It's using something a little bit nicer just because I think it would feel nice. But comparing this to the carbide tools I normally use, there's not that much different. I mean, the handle size is right about on. That's really up to you. This pipe is a little bit thicker, and frankly, one of the things I would change, I would probably use the red inserts from Harbor Freight, which would mean likely a 3/8 inch bore, as opposed to the 1/4 inch pipe that I'm using right now. But realistically, these are a really nice option if you want to try and make a few tools. Now, going back to things that I might change is I really like this keyless chuck, but it takes a lot of tools to actually use it. Since we have a threaded insert into this coupler, you can just essentially epoxy these into the actual pipe and then exchange not at the top here, but instead at this connector. And if you do something like that, you could also bend various of these pipes to end up getting something to work inside of hollow forms or vases. I think that would be really interesting to try in the future. Well, thank you for your guys' time. It is really hot here, and it's time for me to go. Goodbye. This is our final product. Again, thank you for your time. Please like and subscribe, and if you could leave a comment, that would really help me out. Thank you and goodbye.